Today on the Criss Cinema Podcast, two legendary westerns, The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and Unforgiven. But do we print the truth or the legend? On the Criss Cinema Podcast.
Two fellows meet accidentally, like you and me. No connection between them at all, never saw each other before. They swap murders. Crisscross.
Wilson! I'm sorry, Wilson! A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day.
You gotta keep breathing, because tomorrow the sun will rise. Who knows what the tide could bring?
Hello and welcome to the Criss Cinema Podcast, where we crisscross cinema history to find connections that elude the casual eye. Try and spot them along with us. Today, we parse between truth and legend in 1962's The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance and 1992's Unforgiven. Hi, I'm Aaron Wilson, a writer struggling to find my pen.
And I'm Mark Klobus, a teacher trying to stay on top of everything.
And I'm Phil Staley. I got to grow up and be a cowboy.
If you'd like to get access to bonus features and deleted clips from Crisscross and our sister show, Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. Today, just as always, we'll review our two films and then we go crisscross to compare and contrast. But first, Mark, what media has blown through your view?
Well, I decided after seeing some people praising it for what it is, admittedly not the greatest cinema, I decided to give Roadhouse a try, the new one with Jake Gyllenhaal,
nice.
Which, you know, a lot of people, I think, are comparing it to the original with Patrick Swayze as though that is some sort of, you know, all-time classic.
Gold standard.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, it lacks some of it's definitely, you know, not that. But then again, it's very enjoyable for what it is. I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal's fine at it. The one thing that bugged me about it, though, for some reason, they do CGI for the fighting.
That's weird.
Exactly. And I get maybe because like some camera stuff and everything. But, you know, if you go in there not expecting to see Patrick Swayze and Ben Gazzara and Sam Elliott, it's a perfectly entertaining film. It's one of those ones. It's just nice to kind of, you know, turn on, tune in, and then just kind of zone out and just enjoy it for what it is. So.
Yeah, it'd be tough for me to watch that, I think. Yeah. I want to see it just because I loved Roadhouse. And it's one of the few films I've watched more than twice. Mm-hmm. Just, I don't know why. It's just I like Sam Elliott.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So, yeah, I may have to go see that.
Yeah. But like I said, just don't go in there expecting to see Sam Elliott, right. and you'll enjoy it a lot more. So. How about you, Phil? What have you been watching lately?
Well, I'm like you. I went to see Dune 2. I know you had mentioned that to me earlier.
Oh, what'd you think of it?
I really enjoyed it. The effects were amazing in the cinematography. It truly was. Yeah, so I enjoyed it just from that aspect. You know, good story, fun story.
Yeah, and that's definitely a film that really, it's one of those many films that really deserves to be seen in theater.
Exactly.
I mean, I have no doubt that it's going to be great on the small screen, but it really needs to be seen on the big screen.
Yeah, certain ones need to be big screen, and that's one of them for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How about you, Aaron?
So I saw Apollo 13, classic for sure. It's weird to think that it's probably over 30 years old now.
Oh, Sonny, I saw that one on the big screen. Yeah, so now thanks for making me feel that old.
I remember my uncle watching it in the family room of his house, and that's probably not the first time I watched it, but that's one of my first exposures to it. Mm-hmm. And just the astronauts strapping up and stuff. Well, for those who don't know the premise of it, it's astronauts going to the moon and something horrible happens in the spacecraft where they're stranded and they have to get back to Earth. And they have minimal resources because they had a leak of the oxygen tanks. And so that's the situation. But there's this story that he's telling. It's a replay that his wife is watching, talking about a time that he was stranded out at sea in this airplane. He's trying to find the carrier, and he couldn't find it. The algae behind the ship was being turned up, and the lights in his plane turned off for a second and he was freaking out, but he was only able to see the algae because the lights in his plane turned off. And so he followed those lights onto the carrier. And so he ends it with the line of, "You never know what's going to transpire to bring you home." And it's so great. Thematically, it just ties in perfectly. And it's the reason I love storytelling, these kind of moments. But yeah, it's a great movie.
It is. For me, it's an example that whole genre of what they nowadays call competency porn, the idea of watching really capable people tackling problems and solving it. I mean, sometimes the problem seems insurmountable, and that's such a great one for it.
Yeah.
This idea of 3 men trapped in a capsule with only minimal control over where they're going and with minimal resources available to them. And it's just such a great puzzle about how they work it out. And it's all the more fascinating for being true.
Yeah.
It's not like they couldn't just suddenly, reverse the polarity of the neutron flow or whatever they do. And, your modern science fiction ones, they actually had to, work through those problems, and it's just so nicely done.
And they're all reality based because that's exactly what happened.
Exactly.
I have to shout out the score real quick because that's actually what caught me. I was watching it for research for another video that I'm going to be doing. But that score, just the and then those 90s. I don't know if it's timpani or some kind of percussion hits that are just like. And it's so just gives you chills every time you hear it. And I don't know. Sorry for singing. So yeah, that's what we've been watching. So let's start with our review. Just like always, we'll be diving deep. Fair warning, here there be spoilers. And now our review of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance.
Well, this is an interesting film in terms of how it's an extended flashback, and you don't know that going in because it begins with the scene of a train pulling into the station in this town called Shinbone. And you start off by meeting the characters, not as we're going to see them in the movie, but we see their older versions. So off the train, we see stepping off United States Senator Ransom Stoddard, played by James Stewart. And James Stewart, I don't know about you, but I always find he's one of those actors, like the moment he's on the screen, he just has so much presence. And where I think about it is, a few years back, I went and I watched the first Thin Man sequel. And it's really neat to watch. I mean, Thin Man, which was that's Nick and Nora Charles detective movie, 1930s. It's Myrna Loy and William Powell, and it's very entertaining. And they made a ton of sequels. The second one has James Stewart in it. And it's just so fascinating to watch him in this minor role. But even then, he had that ability. And here it's like, 3 decades later, he has it honed to a fine art, where he just does such a great job of embodying this figure of this. He's not a politician; he's a statesman, and the way and I like the way that they introduce that in the film, where he steps off the train and the Callow reporter is like, "Who's that?" And the station master says, "Don't you recognize that? That's Ransom Stoddard." You just the name. He doesn't have to say he's a United States Senator. Just Ransom Stoddard. All of a sudden, everything clicks. Like, oh wow, it's Ransom Stoddard. And we get to, and we also get to meet his wife, Hallie, and they're picked up by, Link Appleyard, played by Andy Devine, who they have a history with. It's just fascinating how much is established at the very beginning. And yeah, and this is something I was thinking about as I was watching it. I was going to ask you about. I mean, what fascinates me is how they establish all that at the beginning, and yet somehow all the things that are told in flashback are still so suspenseful.
Yeah. Basically, they're doing, this is in the future, but it's doing exactly what the first half of an Act 1 should be. It's giving you all the players, and you're introduced to all these people, of course, older than what they're going to be in the movie. But there's this melancholy sense that she has, especially like looking at all these places she used to be, and she asks Appleyard to take her to like a burnt down house, and they're talking about this guy that lived there, and we don't really know who this person is, but it turns out to be John Wayne's character. And just that that's the hook for it. Like there's this sense that something happened here and you just have to know what happened.
And the way that it's kind of burnt out and just abandoned, it's like, it's very symbolic of the past. And you get this interesting juxtaposition early on where you have the modern age, you have the train, you have they talk about how much Shimbo's changed. They have the school now, and they have all these other cutting edge innovations that are part of their community, and yet they have to take the wagon, horse-drawn wagon out to this burnt out ranch, which seems to be receding further and further into the past as Shinbone keeps up with the present.
Yeah.
It really is an interesting contrast. And I like the fact that they don't even, necessarily, I don't even think they recall if they mention whose place it is.
Yeah, they don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
No, they never mentioned that. Yeah. But it was fascinating to me when they got into the wagon. As you said, they're introducing these characters all very early on, and you establish everybody there. But that scene in the wagon when they're getting ready to go out to the house, there sits the marshal with Hallie, and it is such a tender, warm moment. You see the one side of Andy Devine, being such a caring, loving, warm individual, yet. And the way she looks at him, she reflects that, and you can tell, as you say, it's very reminiscent.
Yeah.
As they're going back there, wonderful memories, but something's going to happen. That, and it's just such a sweet, sweet time in that film. It's not the funny Andy Devine yet.
No, it's not.
At all.
Not quite. Yeah. I think it's interesting that you could probably play that scene at the end of the movie too, and what they're talking about. And that's kind of they're not hiding things from the audience. They're just like, it goes unsaid between them that they know what happened here. And it's cool because it's not like they're trying to be, the writers aren't trying to slip something past you of being like, oh, we're going to hide it from you. It's just that these people have lived it, and you get that sense of that lived feeling, and you want to be in on it.
It really creates a sense of them as very well developed characters.
Yeah.
And it's just so masterful the way that they insert little details, like the way that Stoddard refers to Appleyard as Marshall, and then how when Hallie and Appleyard get in the cart, she talks about him being Marshall, and Appleyard says, I haven't been Marshall in decades. It's the sense that it creates that nice sense that these people, that sense of intimacy, that sense of long familiarity, but also at the same time, the sense that, there's a lot more going on than just that. It's not, that these are, we're seeing this dynamic of change and how so much of who they are is rooted in that past, and how central that past is to their identity still.
Yeah.
That Appleyard has been Marshall in decades, but that's how Stoddard thinks of him. And there's kind of a nice irony there, given what happens later in the film, in terms of how we are so much, rooted in our past, even when it is past, and we're very different people from who we were back then.
Well, and I think too, he sees as being a statesman, he has to be a bit more formal. So he wants to refer to him in a formal sense, like he would have to do in Washington or wherever. That's his persona now, to be that statesman.
And it's especially interesting considering how he gives Appleyard the respect of that title. And as we see in the movie, he doesn't exactly earn it.
No, he doesn't.
He's the law in name only.
He wants to.
Yeah, he does. We see that later on, but when we first get him in the flashback, it's a little different.
So then we get to this point where we go into this room where they have a coffin, and we're not sure whose coffin it is, and more of a hook.
But we also see the fact that Hallie has brought from the burned out ranch a desert flower, which she has put on the coffin, which is really
cactus rose.
The cactus rose, which is really a very tender thing to do.
Yeah.
And really implies the degree of affection they have. And you have the Shinbone Star editor and the reporters who followed Stoddard to the mortician.
And they start asking the questions that we're wondering.
Yeah, exactly.
So here comes the story.
Why are you here? I'm here, and he says, "I'm here to because I want to see the burial of Tom Donovan." And they're scratching their heads. They're like, "Who's Tom Donovan?" Which is again another fascinating commentary on change, because when we see Tom Donovan, later in the movie, everybody knows who Tom Donovan is.
Tom, yeah.
But he's gone from being this larger than life figure to someone who is totally unknown, and he is given this outrageous pauper's funeral. Outrageous in the sense that the mortician has stripped him of his boots.
Yeah.
And you could probably speak to the offensiveness of that even better than I could.
Oh yeah, cowboy got to be buried with his boots on. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. And but back then,
yeah. But it shows you how far he's fallen. The fact that the mortician said it's a pauper's funeral, I got to make money somehow, so I took his boots.
Yeah.
And you see the esteem that Stoddard has for him, where it's like, you put those boots back.
Exactly.
On. Yeah, exactly. So.
And it makes us wonder, as the audience, who is this guy?
Yes.
So that's great.
And so they ask Stoddard this, and Stoddard begins this reflection that takes us back. And it's nicely done, because for some reason, there also happens to be this old abandoned stagecoach in the Undertaker's place of business.
Yeah.
And it's a nice contrast with how Stoddard gets to Shinbone at the beginning of the film, which is by the railroad. And he's looking at the stagecoach, and that takes us back to how he originally arrived in Shinbone a quarter of a century before, which was he did so by stage.
By stagecoach,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But of course, that trip is interrupted when the stage is robbed by a no good, thug named Liberty Valance.
Yep.
And this is where we get, the introduction of the very man whose name is in the title. And to me, it speaks to the caliber of the acting that they got for this film. I mean, you have James Stewart, Oscar winner. You have John Wayne, one of his most famous films. You have all these great character actors, from Strother Martin to Lee Van Cleef to Vera Miles and Woody Strode and Lee Marvin, who's still fairly new to films. He's up there with the best of them, and he's seeing her acting alongside Stewart and Wayne, and he's just amazing at it.
Yeah, he is the ultimate bad guy.
Oh yes,
yeah.
In this, and they set it up that way, as a classic Western.
Mm-hmm.
A little side note on that that I'd read, when I was researching about the movie, in that John Wayne developed his persona as a Western actor, as a cowboy actor, by mimicking Wyatt Earp, whom he had met through Tom Mix.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Mix and Wyatt Earp actually hired Lee Marvin in his first job, or John Wayne in his first job in film as a props boy on a film set. And the rest, as they say, is history. But his walk, his talk, everything was about being Wyatt Earp. And that tie to that past, just fascinates me, and how close that is to our generation in a way,
Yeah, that's surprising. So do you know when Wyatt Earp died? Or
he was in his 80s when he died. And I can't remember what year it was.
Oh, okay.
I want to say around 1930, because he made it through most of the 1920s.
Wow.
And Wayne got his start in the movies around 1928, and that was Tom Mix's heyday.
Oh, okay. I was thinking Stagecoach was his first.
That was his first starring role, but he was doing Republic two-reelers back in throughout much of the 1930s, and he was doing films with both John Ford and Raoul Walsh in the early 30s.
In 1929, he passed away.
It's off by a year.
Yeah, not bad at all.
So as this Stagecoach is getting robbed, Stewart's character Rance, he tries to defend the woman that he's with, and that's when he gets beat down by Valance. And I love how they establish the two characters so perfectly in the scene. I mean, we see Rance Stoddard as this young,
Easterner, fresh out of law school. I mean, for me,
Yeah.
this is the part of the movie I find, hardest to get past, which is James Stewart being a great actor, he can't quite pull off being 25 in this scene.
No.
Yeah.
It was a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But you see both his fundamental goodness and you see Liberty Valance's fundamental
Badness.
in how Valance and his men are robbing the coach, and they're taking out the stuff, and Valance is going to strip the jewelry off this old lady. It's not exactly sapphires and diamonds. It's just a brooch that has enormous sentimental value to her. And so often you think about these gentlemen bandits are like of course you can have your own personal lives, but Valance is not. He's going to take candy from the baby. He's going to take the brooch off the old lady, and Stoddard, who could just sit there and do nothing, stands up to Liberty Valance, who setting aside the fact that Liberty Valance is this evil thug. He's got guys with him, so there's no way Stoddard's not going to beat Liberty Valance. And yet he bravely stands up to it. I think he actually distracts Valance from taking the brooch, but he pays this horrible price for it.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically beaten to a pulp, and he's actually he's abandoned. I think Valance and his men, they send off the stagecoach before they beat him, so he's basically left to die.
Yeah, and then at the end of his beating, there's this nice little touch at the end where he's rifling through his belongings to see if there's anything valuable, and there's his law books, and he's like, I can't remember what it's called, but I think it's just called The Law, the book, and he's like, what? And he rips out the pages and throws them, and it's like, okay, we know what this guy thinks about the law, and it's just kind of the simplest breakdown of his character. If he has no concern for the law, and at the same time we know he's the exact opposite of Rance.
And it also signals how Stoddard is attempting to bring the law. He is, and it's so unusual. Like so many westerns, so often the law is seen as the man with the gun, and yet that is an aspect of the traditional western that Stewart's character so explicitly rejects.
Yeah.
Throughout so much of the story.
Yeah, he wants to bring the new West with law and order, and without having the gunfights and everything. Exactly. But that whole thing establishes them both as extremely strong character. Men with strong characters. They're willing to stand up for whatever. And do whatever it takes.
Yeah, I feel like that side of his character is very Western, like what a John Wayne would have in another movie.
Yeah,
where their method of fighting is with a gun, but his method of fighting just happens to be a law book.
But it's one that relies upon cooperation with the authorities rather than one man doing it on his own. And that's part of the the process we're going to see him go through over the course of the movie. So. Now, Stoddard survives, but he survives because he's found by Tom Donovan. And this is when we, for the first time, actually see who Donovan is. And who is it? None other than
John Wayne.
John Wayne, who rides into town. He has his as he puts in the movie, his man, Pompey, Woody Strode's character, following with the wagon. And inside the wagon is Stoddard. And Donovan takes him to Hallie, who works at this boarding house, this restaurant, and she treats his wounds. And this is where we get to see how those two meet. And it's a really interesting situation because it's where you see Stoddard for the first time expressing what he intends to do. There's so much going on in that scene, I think.
Yeah.
Because you see Stoddard's intentions in terms of why he's coming to town. You also see, and he's presenting this to Hallie. He's presenting this to the owners of Peter's Place, and he's also presenting to Donovan, and we see Donovan's reaction to it, and we also see Donovan's feelings for Hallie. There's just so much that's set up in this one scene.
Yeah, and we get to see all the characters that we've already seen before, but now they're younger, and that's a really good pool to get you, like, you've already know these people, and now let's get going with it. Yeah.
And we see that contrast established, where we see Stoddard says, he wants to jail Liberty Valance, and Donovan says to him, and this is one of the lines I wrote down, out here a man settles his own problems. So he's nothing like Liberty Valance in terms of his values. As a person, he nonetheless, has embraced that. And Stoddard says, "You're talking like Liberty Valance does." And so there we see another conflict where Donovan and Stoddard are on the same side, but their approaches are diametrically opposed. Yeah. And I like how that conflict is up, where something's got to give. We don't know what yet, but at some point, either Donovan's going to give or Stoddard's going to give. And knowing what is going to follow, there's this assumption that it's not going to end well for Donovan.
Yeah. This is interesting thematically. Like, Stoddard represents the armature, or for those who don't know that term, like the main theme of what the movie's trying to get across. He represents like law and order, and like doing things by the law book and bringing that civilization in. And John Wayne's character represents the old way of doing it in the Old West, the way of the gun, basically. So, yeah.
But I think you expect, only because John Wayne's in it, that it's going to be settled somehow with the gun. Mm-hmm. You anticipate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't far off, but yeah.
But we also get the sense that if it is going to be Donovan or Stoddard, because this is also when we're introduced to the younger Link Appleyard, played by the great Andy Devine.
Right.
And he is a person who wears a badge and who has that role, but has none of the authority that he is. I love how quickly they establish him as being an out-and-out coward.
But he's wonderful comic relief throughout the entire movie. I mean, just his voice, he can do so much with. But John Ford uses him very effectively as the comic relief and the tension reliever throughout the entire movie.
Now, I'm racking my brains. I don't have any thorough command of the Western genre, but had there been a film before then that made the law enforcement figure such a figure of comic relief?
I can't think of one.
I can't either.
Typically, they were the John Wayne character. That was your marshal, and
like Rio Bravo, for example.
Exactly.
Yes, or High Noon in terms of Gary Cooper.
Yeah.
But and it really it's such a great way of underscoring just how neglected the law is, and how little traction it has, that a person like Link Appleyard has it, where he is constantly trying to find excuses not to do his job because and it's not that he doesn't want to do his job. He just knows he's no match for Liberty Valance. Nobody in Shinbone is a match for Liberty Valance, with the exception, as we'll see, of Tom Donovan.
Yeah.
And it's just this idea of how it kind of gets to why it is that Stoddard's approach isn't going, hasn't worked up to this point, is because the authority that you would turn to handle this, he knows he's not up to the task, and he fears for his life. He doesn't want to undertake that. But we get this interesting, in the next scene, we get this interesting establishment of Stoddard's willingness to reject a lot of Western expectations, because the stage has been robbed, he's lost his belongings. He is dependent upon Donovan's charity. He's depending upon Hallie's charity. He's depending upon the charity of the couple that runs Peter's Place, and he's eager to pay his way, and he does it by doing women's work. And we see him during a typical Saturday night. He's washing dishes. He's wearing an apron. I mean, so not only is he doing what is derided as women's work, he is sort of dressed as a woman doing it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. The fact that he's even in the kitchen.
Exactly. I mean, it's okay for the guy whose name is on the sign that he's back there, but it's him, it's his wife, it's Hallie, and then there's Ransom Stoddard who is doing women's work while all the men who do the cowboying and the farming, they're out in the front room relaxing with by having dinners and so forth. We also see a lot of things that are established here, which is we see him as an agent of civilization. Mm-hmm. And I like how they establish that in not just terms of law, but when he's going through law books, he's trying to find precedent to have Appleyard go and arrest Liberty Valance, which Appleyard's like he's perfectly jovial, he's enjoying himself because he's being fed, and then Stoddard says, well, I found this precedent in this book where you could arrest Liberty Valance, and he goes, arrest Liberty Valance. Jaw drops and everything. And how he tries to show this to Hallie, and Hallie is like, she can't read or write. And Stoddard thinks nothing of saying to her, well, I'll teach you how to read and write. Which is a great symbol of civilization, but it's also his another example of his willingness to do what was at the time regarded as women's work, being a teacher.
Yeah, that's true. It's interesting though that the way that this happens is she's like, "You think I really could learn how to read and write?" And the most Stewart delivery of all time. Well, sure you could.
Yeah. It also does a nice job of representing why Hallie is drawn to Stoddard and why she eventually becomes his wife, because he represents with civilization the opportunity of a better life. Mm-hmm. And it's something where up until that point, that opportunity was coming in the form of Donovan. And there's that nice symbolism of it where he shows up and he gives Hallie a cactus rose.
Yeah.
And it's and it's a nice callback to the beginning of the film, where she puts one on his
coffin there.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And how she has that.
It's kind of a reverse setup and payoff thing of we're seeing, we see it happen in the future, and then we see the first time that it happened.
Right.
Anyway.
It's nicely done, I think, also because she acknowledges, we see how Donovan is, it's a confirmation he's sweetheart, she knows it, but he hasn't quite taken that final step. And he also is a little wary of Stoddard, and yet, and this is where I really couldn't decide at what point do they really establish Stoddard having that interest in her, because I don't.
Okay, it's a perfect setup for what I'm going to say right here. They plant the I guess Pompey goes out and plants the desert rose out in the garden, and she's looking out the door at it. Out the back door, and she's like, have you ever seen anything more beautiful in your life? And then Rance is looking out the back door, and he's like, have you ever seen a real rose, Hallie? And here comes the love triangle. Mm-hmm. He's got some competition.
He sees an opportunity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'll bring her a real rose.
Yeah.
But it also underscores again how Stoddard offers so many bigger things. And Donovan, for all of his commitment to Hallie, his love for her, his devotion to her, the most he offers is his life. And he is perfectly content with his life. He's making room for Hallie, both metaphorically. He's preparing to make room for Hallie, both metaphorically and literally.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's a life that, while she might be content with, it's clear that the moment Stoddard says, I'll teach you how to read and write, he's saying, there are bigger horizons, and that's very powerful.
And she's ready to move past all of that, what Donovan is offering. Yeah,
exactly.
He's very satisfied to have the old way, the old West, settle down, and she wants to move past that.
Yeah. And you get the sense that, Donovan's not above hemming in her perspective, constraining her horizons to do that. I mean, he can't say, don't learn how to read and write, but you see periodically throughout the film where he doesn't like the fact that Hallie seems to be pulling away from him and towards this bigger thing. That's not a journey he wants to go on. So, but Stoddard goes into the dining room, and he joins everyone else who's there, having dinner, and that's when Liberty Valance arrives.
Yeah.
And there's that great scene, going back to what you were saying, Phil, about the comic relief.
Yeah.
Where the moment Appleyard, who's in the back, hears Valance's voice, boom, he's out the door.
But again, here John Ford has a lot of ruckus out there in the dining room all before Valance walks in. And the second Liberty Valance walks in, it's dead silent.
Yeah.
And he does that so effectively throughout the film.
Mm-hmm.
Big fight scenes going on. Valance walks in, dead silence. Mm-hmm. And later on we'll get into some of the other places, but I thought that was so dynamic, what Ford did there.
And Marvin does such a great job of selling just how intimidating Valance is. How he walks up to these cowboys, these men who are plenty tough, and he's just taking food off their table. He basically kicks them out of their own table.
Yeah.
He doesn't do it by physically doing; he just does it by intimidating them out of it.
And then he touches the wrong person's steak.
Yes,
John Wayne's.
and of course, but he didn't. He doesn't actually touch the steak. What he does is Stoddard's going to deliver it to Donovan.
Oh, that's right.
And Valance just trips him, and so you have that double humiliation of Stoddard in an apron delivering food to Donovan, which underscores this kind of his at this point his subservience, if you will.
Yeah.
And then Valance disrupts that, and it prompts this confrontation between Donovan and Valance. And it's such a fascinating confrontation because it gives the sense that some showdown between the two men was already building before Stoddard arrived. And that this might be the moment where they have it out. And where Donovan's telling Valance, pick it up. And of course, Valance isn't going to do that, especially in front of his men.
Yeah.
And Strother Martin, who one of his cronies, is like, I'll pick it up for you, Valance. And Donovan kicks him in the face, kicks him aside. He wants Valance to do it. And the situation is diffused by Stoddard, who is he does not want this to be the cause of violence. And so he puts the steak back on the plate, and here it's done. And it does diffuse the situation. Mm-hmm. Valance basically is like, you get the impression that Valance is intimidated by Donovan. Not that he doesn't think that he couldn't win, but he knows it's the one situation where it's in doubt. And so he backs down, and situations diffuse for a moment. But this gets to where Stoddard is beginning to realize he has to change. Because up until this point, Donovan's been saying to him, you're not going to beat Valance unless you have a gun in your hand. And Stoddard is, conceding the need for it, but he still can't bring himself to actually arm himself. He still thinks that all he needs to arm himself with is the law, and that at some point will be enough. It's that commitment to his values that just really makes him such an admirable figure.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. This kitchen set that we see them in. We're about an hour in and we haven't left this kitchen. So they get so much use out of this kitchen. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. The first time I watched it, the biggest thing I remembered of it was just that pile of steaks, like those big thick steaks that they had in there.
There's like half a cow laying.
Yeah. I'm like, I want one of those.
Yeah. I mean, they do look so incredibly good. And of course, it's the only thing that they have to offer. That was one of the things I liked about it was how everyone comes in, they're ordering the same things. That's the only thing. Steak, potatoes, pie.
You forgot the beans.
Yeah, sorry, the beans too. Then we jump forward in time 3 weeks and we see Stoddard integrating himself into the community. He is now working at the Shinbone Star. He's working for Peabody, Edmund O'Brien's character, another great actor, another great performance. And we see him not just, working and teaching, but we also see him becoming invested in this larger issue that is defining the conflict that Valance and Donovan are personifying, which is that we learn that Valance is an agent for the ranchers, and the ranchers are taking advantage. Basically, they're benefiting from the status quo to control the land, control the water north of the picket wire. They basically rule, and how the Shinbone and the farmers surrounding it, they want statehood. And Peabody is who like Stoddard's also from the East. He is championing this, and Stoddard thinks it's so wonderful that he takes Peabody's editorial and he has his students in his class read it.
Yeah,
and it's that he's in a sense he recognizes that is civilization coming. If we get this through, then we're a step closer to achieving that dream, and he's willing to fight for that. He's willing to embrace it. You see that passion that Stewart does such a great job of selling.
Yeah, he's extremely passionate throughout the whole thing. But also here, you're seeing Stoddard establish himself more in the community. Mm. He's become much more a part of it now, rather than the guy washing dishes, and serving food in the kitchen. Now he's teaching. He's involved in the newspaper. He's working there. So he, more and more every day, he's more involved in that community that we're going to see in the future, in the very end of the movie, why that's established.
Yeah.
And we're seeing in that class how he's winning the respect of the community.
Yeah.
His class is growing. Pompey is there. We have the scene with the three ranch hands, showing up. They drew a short straw, but the fact is that they did show up. And they're coming to appreciate what Stoddard is doing for them.
Yeah.
And this wide shot in this classroom just looked like a Norman Rockwell painting to me. just showing all these people in the class. Like, I guess you've got all these different ethnicities and walks of life, and just him at the head of the class, and the entire shot of everybody in the classroom. I don't know, just screamed Norman Rockwell at me.
And you have that where you see the expression of the values, which is where he has Stoddard just, okay, let's talk about the Declaration of Independence. He has Pompey try to summarize it, and he corrects Pompey gently, but he does it. But then this scene is disrupted by Donovan, who's been gone for 3 weeks, engaged in business, and he's upset that not enough work's been done on the ranch because Pompey's been distracted by civilization. But also he brings news that Valance is hiring men to disrupt this upcoming election that will help determine whether or not statehood's going to take place. And this is when Hallie learns that Stoddard has been practicing with a gun. So Stoddard is, it's interesting how he's the one who demonstrates his flexibility. And this is something I think that really becomes key to why it is that he is the one the statesman who steps off the train later in the movie. He's the one who is willing to accept the need for change and to adapt without trying to lose his values.
I love how they end this scene, this classroom scene, just leading into what you're talking about, of like, there's this conflict throughout it of the way of the gun versus the way of the law. And he has written up on the board, education is the key to law and order. And it's just this little touch of he erases that. And it's like he kind of doesn't believe it as much as before. And that's when we learn that he's been practicing with the gun.
Shortly thereafter that he's out there target shooting with the gun.
Yeah.
And this and who is it that is trying to deter him but Hallie? And who does she turn to do so but Donovan? And you got to figure that had, and that's where I think you see Donovan starting the conversation with Stoddard by saying, Hallie's my girl. he's that for him is the priority, and is that he has to try to warn Stoddard off. And it's like he doesn't appreciate the fact that it's not that Stoddard is openly courting Hallie. It's the fact that Hallie is drawn irresistibly to what Stoddard has to offer. Yeah. What he symbolizes, what he represents. But then he tests Stoddard's skills. And there's a sense where he's trying to make Stoddard appreciate his inadequacies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's that great scene with where he has
the cans on the fence.
the cans on the
Right.
fence.
Yeah, so he takes these paint cans and he does it very specifically. He's like, okay, go put it on those 3 posts.
These full paint cans. We should add.
full paint cans. And so he puts one on the first post. Then he's going to put it on the second post. He's like, nope, go put it on the far post. And then he comes back to the middle post, and then right as he puts it on top, bang, bang on the side of the cans, and he's dodging like crazy. As soon as he ducks down, he shoots the 3rd can, and it blows up all over him. Just ruins a nice suit.
But he set it up because that was a taller fence post.
Yeah.
And that's why you had to have him at that center one.
And Stoddard's reaction is that he punches Donovan in the jaw. Now, I don't know how many people in the films of John Wayne got away with punching his characters in the jaw. But the Stoddard does. And this is where I really think that John Wayne does such a great job in this role, because you see him on the ground rubbing his jaw, and he sells the fact that he respects Stoddard.
Yeah, this look of admiration.
exactly.
Like shock and admiration at the same time.
Yeah, he's kind of like he is that for all of his issues with Stoddard, and with all of his disagreement with what the change that Stoddard is bringing with him, he respects him. He respects his courage.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he thinks he's foolish standing up to Valance without a gun. He thinks that Stoddard doesn't have the ability to do so with a gun, but he cannot deny that Stoddard, at the end of the day, even though he humiliates him, showers him with white paint, is that he respects, even after going through the fact that Stoddard in his way stood up to Donovan. And so he, commits to that. So then we get what is in a lot of ways my favorite scene of the movie, which is the town meeting to choose the delegates for the territorial convention. Because it's such a, you were talking earlier about Norman Rockwell, Aaron, and
for sure.
It's such it's such a nice Rockwell-esque setup, kind of like the rough and tumble of democracy.
Yeah.
And how they're all meeting there. And of course, they
this could be in a Frank Capra movie.
Exactly. Especially given that you have such a Capra-esque figure like James Stewart participating in it. So, but you have the it's being held in the saloon, and of course, which is of course is an issue because Stoddard and his rules, you can't drink while you're holding into the vote, which really bothers Peabody because he's such a drunkard.
Yeah.
But Stoddard is the person who's running it because he knows the rules. He's the law. And you see Stoddard's respect for Donovan reflected in the fact that the person Stoddard nominates, the first person who's nominated is Donovan. And this, I feel, is like where Donovan missed out perhaps on his last opportunity to really stay in the hunt for Hallie, because here he has a chance to be an agent for civilization by going to the territorial convention, by pushing for statehood and what that brings. And it's clear that he is, even more so than Stoddard, the most admired man in the community. Mm-hmm. And he declines that role because he has personal plans. And I feel like that choice right there, he doesn't realize that, his personal plans are not going to succeed.
He's wrecking his personal plans by not doing that.
But then guess who shows up?
Yeah. And then there's just this sound of commotion outside, and like horses riding up, and exactly who's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And again, a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Like you say, a lot of commotion outside, a lot of commotion inside. And then here comes Valance. And immediately it's silent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One more time.
Yeah. And the way that he shoves himself in, it's like it really is a great, representation of how he's inserting himself in a place where he doesn't belong. He's pushing his way forward with his 2 men.
Yeah.
And his plan is to get named a delegate. And I love how he turns to his men. He's like, now say it like I told you. And then, Strathenberg goes, I nominate Liberty Valance. And then Lee Van Cleef goes, I second the nomination. But Stoddard has really, for the first time, he has the rules on his side, and he has the ability to enforce them. Where he says, you can't just do that. It has to be a vote. And this is when Donovan nominates Stoddard, and they nominate Peabody, and they're elected the delegates, and Valance is not. And he threatens all the farmers. You sodbusters, you're probably brave when you're all together, but afterward, I'm going to get payback. And he specifically calls out Stoddard.
And of course, when he's threatening him, Pompey comes in with the lever action rifle. Every time there's problem, there's Pompey there at the door with the lever action rifle.
Mm-hmm. Although you get the impression he's there more to ensure that's a one-on-one match. I always felt like he was there more about the cronies than he was not going to that Donovan didn't need Pompey there just to take on Valance.
Oh, right, yeah.
He needed him to make sure that it wasn't a 3-on-1 fight. So.
Yeah.
But Valance has declared that there's going to be a reckoning between him and Stoddard. It's going to be that night in the street. And Donovan offers to help Stoddard leave town. And I'm thinking about this. I mean, in one sense, it shows the degree to which, Donovan feels like Stoddard's not up to this. But there's also this selfish motive, because what does he do if he gets Stoddard to leave town? He clears the field for himself with Hallie. Not only does he physically remove Stoddard from Hallie's presence, he also, in effect, discredits Stoddard's courage. Because even though you can't really hold it against Stoddard to avoid a confrontation that he can't possibly win, supposedly, but you also have the effect of saying that he's still cut and run, which is something Donovan doesn't do. By his standard, he will have demonstrated to Hallie that he's the better man. And yet, what does Stoddard say? I'm staying.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing about his character that just makes him so, I guess, admirable, but just that connects you to his character.
It's that strength that he displays through the whole thing. I mean, even when he talks, he's very self-assured, and positive, and he's gonna show that strength no matter what he does throughout his whole appearance in this.
Yeah.
But that evening, we see the Peabody at the Shinbone Star, and Evan O'Brien. I think the only reason his comedic performance isn't better appreciated is the fact that Divines is so much more showy.
Yeah.
But O'Brien as the drunken town editor is just wonderful at it.
It's interesting that I hadn't recognized until you said in there that he's a drunk, and I'm like why is he a drunk? In that scene, like the reason why it's like that, it's to show his like how it makes him feel to be nominated for this. He doesn't want to be a statesman. He doesn't want to be a politician. He's a newspaper man. He's got and so he's like, just give me a drink. and then later on they use this great for exposition. He's talking to his moonshine jug.
Yes.
Which this is a shameless self-plug, but we have a talking moonshine jug in our zombie movie, Surviving the Zombie Plague. So that's an interesting parallel, but it's a great way of exposition that you can get out what's in the character's head by like, oh, I'm talking to the moonshine jug here.
And the way he does it too, he's not just conversing it with it. He's delivering lines from Shakespeare to it.
Oh yeah.
He's kind of like this very pompous character in a lot of ways. Very sincere in terms of his commitment, because I mean his bravery also isn't to be doubted, because he's prepping the newspaper. There's that clownishness where he misspells a word in the headline, but then he goes out and he talks with, I think it was the town doctor, and then he comes back in, and I just love that reveal where he lights the lamp, he
it's so
brightens it, and he's
man.
surrounded by Valance and his men.
Yeah, that was beautifully done.
That's just the worst, though. Like, just you know what's happening, and it's like what's going to go down, and it does.
And he doesn't beg, he doesn't plead, he doesn't run. He knows it's going to happen, and while he's basically says trying to say don't do it, he's not gonna flinch.
Yeah.
He's not gonna bolt. And so he gets beaten up. The offices of the Shinbone Star get trashed, and Valance and his men, having done what they came to do, they then go to the bar. Stoddard comes in from Peter's place along with other town members, and this is the moment that flips him. This is the moment where he's going to confront Valance, and he's going to do it on Valance's terms. He is not being true to himself, but he recognizes that he needs to make that compromise if he is going to see his way forward. And it's such a fascinating moment where we see just how much Stoddard's willing to sacrifice to achieve what he needs to do. And he goes and retrieves his gun. And you get the impression this is not going to end well. And it doesn't seem to. He is clearly outmatched when they have the shootout. I mean, Valance doesn't even bother to shoot, to kill him. He decides, I'm going to humiliate him with first in the shootout. And he does it. He's drunk. So,
and he toys with him like a cat with a mouse.
Yeah.
Exactly. Through that whole scene.
Shoots him in the arm.
Yeah.
Which causes Valance to lose the gun.
Shoots the light behind him.
Yeah. It's a hanging pot that's right next to him. Yeah.
He doesn't even fear Stoddard with the gun. He's like, go pick it up. And so, Stoddard has it in his hand, and he gives Stoddard a chance to rearm himself, and now I'm going to kill you. And then you have that exchange of bullets, and it's Valance who falls.
Yes.
To everybody's amazement.
Yeah.
And I love how they sell that, how the entire town just crowds around Valance's body. And my favorite one by far is the doctor. Whiskey, quick, so he can take a swig and do what he said he was going to do just a scene before. I look forward to the day I can pronounce you dead. He takes a swig. He's dead. No effort to try to keep Valance alive because nobody wants him around.
Yeah.
And that's the moment where Hallie is his. He goes back to Peter's place. She's dressing his wound, and you could tell. I mean, he was the one who stood up to Valance. He was the one who won, and the person who lost wasn't Valance. It was Donovan. And the way she's tending the wound, she's expressing her affection for Stoddard. And Donovan's just there in the background, and he's like, and you could tell he realizes he is lost.
Yeah, and that was the other very, very tender scene in the movie, similar to the one we saw in the beginning with Andy Devine and Hallie. And in this one, it is one of the only two places where there is background music. That is strictly background music.
I didn't even notice.
Very tender moment.
Yeah, I missed that too.
Any other music that was played in this entire movie was either a band playing or a piano player in the bar.
Yeah.
Or the marching band that we see for the convention. Mm-hmm. That's the only time there's music in there. But this is the only true background music to establish this extremely tender moment where she's wrapping his arm.
And in doing so, she's breaking Donovan.
Yeah.
Because then we see him do something that we haven't really seen him do up to this point. He goes to the saloon and he starts to drink. And you could tell how unusual this is because Pompey follows him. He's, Pompey shows up and, and Donovan's like, take a drink. And you could tell that it's not who Donovan is,
yeah.
but he's shattered. And Valance's men are in the saloon trying to convince everyone to hang Stoddard. They're trying to do this sort of intimidation thing and it's interesting because they can't just go and do it themselves. They fear Stoddard now.
Right.
And then Donovan, throws Strother Martin out of the bar, and Lee Van Cleef tries to pull his gun, and Donovan karate chops it out of his hand practically. Donovan is so shattered. His future is over. So he goes back to the ranch. And this is when we learned how it would burn down. It burned down because Donovan deliberately set it on fire, and he did it to commit suicide. He burns down the extension he was building for Hallie, and he just sits there, and it's only through Pompey's intervention that he doesn't go up in flames and die at that moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then we cut to the territorial convention, and this is when we get
There we go.
Major Cassius Starbuckle.
Good old Starbuckle. Yes. John Carradine in his booming voice.
Yeah. See, I mean, he's one of those fantastic figures,
and he's just bigger than life.
Oh my gosh!
Every time he acts.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Starbuckle is the representative of the cattlemen. He's their spokesperson, and he's there because their plan is to renominate the existing territorial delegate. And it's interesting. This guy is the territorial delegate. He's on the stage. I don't think he has a single line in this movie, which is kind of hilarious because he's basically their mouthpiece. He's their puppet. And he doesn't even have any say for himself. It's the cat. It's Starbuckle, who you would think would be the representative, but he has that great nominating speech, and it's this wonderfully theatrical thing. I have I wrote this speech, but there's no time for flowery words. And he balls it up and throws it to the ground, and the doctor picks it up, and it's a blank piece of paper. It's all theater. It's all show, and which is underscored by the fact that once he gives this pompous, florid nominating speech, the cowboy on the horse rides in. He's got the lariat. He's
on the stage.
Was that on the paper?
Yeah, exactly. It was clearly in the plan because it was all perfectly timed. It's all the hoopla and everything.
Yeah.
But the farmers have a plan of their own. They're going to put up their own delegate, and this is when Peabody gives this great speech, and it's about. And he's building to nominate Ransom Stoddard. And I love the way they do it, where as he's building to where he's announcing Stoddard's name, you see all the people on the territorial side are turning towards Stoddard and grinning and everything. And Peabody sells it by saying, we're going to nominate him because he's the man who shot Liberty Valance. And this horrifies Stoddard.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not horrified by the idea of becoming the territorial delegate, but he's horrified by the fact he's going to become the territorial delegate because he killed a man.
Yeah.
I mean, in effect, he's going to become an agent of civilization by having betrayed civilization. And he wants nothing to do with it. He rejects it. And so he storms out of the convention.
Yeah, he feels like he's betrayed his values.
Yeah, that he established throughout the entire story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's followed by Donovan, who is a wreck. His clothes he's disheveled. He hasn't shaved. He's smoking, and he corners Stoddard in a room, and he's basically saying, "Why are you not doing this?" And he says, "I'm not going to build a career upon killing a man." And this is when Donovan tells him, "You're not the one who killed Valance," and you get that great dissolve.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Where the smoke kind of goes. So you take him back to that night, and you see that Donovan was off in the shadows, and during the confrontation, he arrived in time to see it, and he has Pompey toss him his rifle, and the moment that the final exchange takes place, he shoots Valance. Yeah. And in doing so, it's such a fascinating moment. I mean, it's the pivotal moment of the movie, because by telling Stoddard this, Donovan relieves him of the guilt of having killed a man. But at the same time now, Stoddard's career is built upon this lie. And it's something that Stoddard will carry with him for the rest of his life. And yet, and this is something that I thought about afterward. Did Donovan really shoot Valance? Or is this a story he's telling Stoddard so as to get him to do what Donovan wants him to do? Not for the farmers necessarily, not for himself, but for Hallie. That great line about how, you go be the man that Hallie wants you to be. It's this idea that, he alleviates that guilt by telling him the story, which we see, but we see only through the hazy flashback, the smoky flashback.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me that you have this flashback within a flashback.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
In the entire thing. So it's a double flashback.
Yeah, because the whole movie is the flashback from the future that we
which
saw.
you almost forget because it starts so early in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes so long to get back to the present. Yeah.
And the fact that it's a flashback that is told entirely from Donovan's perspective, and the fact that it's done very differently from the way we saw the first one, it's like maybe it's not. Maybe that smokiness is because he's actually obscuring the truth with a bit of a legend.
Yeah.
So that is necessary to advance the legend that Ransom Stoddard becomes.
Yeah, I think that's a great theory, but I think I'd leave it in theory zone though. It's I like the way that it plays in the movie, but I get your reasoning though. It is very compelling.
Well, it's where it's done in a way where I think it sustains the interpretation, but I agree it's probably not there. But it's one of those things where I mean they could have had it in such a way, because you go back and watch the scene of the shootout. The way that Ford stages it, I mean, where Donovan shoots Valance from, we don't see it at all.
Yeah.
So it's not like what you might see nowadays, where another filmmaker might have staged it in such a way to where you have it's off in the corner. You might see a brief flash or something to kind of as foreshadowing of what really happened. So it's staged in such a way to where it's plausible.
Yeah,
but I agree.
It leaves it very open.
Exactly.
Because you never actually see anything to suggest that he really did.
But Donovan has to tell him this, because otherwise Stoddard won't do what he needs to do. And it's almost a sense that, having lost Hallie, Donovan doesn't want it to be in vain.
Yeah, he's given up at this point. Say, okay, come on, go ahead, do it.
Yeah. It's in that sense, it's kind of like a noble act what he does. So.
Yeah.
And that, of course, takes us to the present, where Stoddard's finished telling the story to newspapermen who are recording this. And then the editor, takes the notes and he throws them in the stove. And he has that great line, that iconic line, when the legend becomes fact, print the legend.
Yeah.
Such a wonderful line. It's one of the all-time, I think, famous lines, and it gets to how that it's the legend that matters more.
Tell people what they want to hear. I mean, it's Horace Greeley established that, and that was Peabody's teacher. Mm-hmm. He said he had worked with him. I thought that was very cool that they brought him and Horace Greeley into it at all.
Yeah, and it was one of the, and it was and the way they brought it into it was where it was visible enough to where if you're paying attention, you saw it, but Ford didn't clobber you on the head with it.
No, it was just mentioned.
Yes, exactly.
And to bring it forward into the future too, it does remind me of The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises, where they have the lie about Harvey Dent, that he was this figure that was, it kind of sells up him a little bit as the man who shot Liberty Valance. Mm-hmm. Whereas in The Dark Knight, they form this lie so that they can set through this system of laws to clean up Gotham. And anyway, I'm not going to nerd out about Batman right now. But.
It's also just because in some ways it's like Donovan's revenge. Because I mean, the fact that Stoddard doesn't want this. I mean, he is so disgusted. He's telling the story two men who he fully expects will publish it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is only the decision of the editor not to, that he doesn't get away with it. He's exhausted with having to bear this. And that's where you get that great final scene where he's in the train and he's riding through the land that he changed. And I mean, because they summarize his subsequent history very nicely, where he becomes the territorial delegate, he gets statehood, he becomes a governor, senator, ambassador, senator again. He could be vice president of the United States if he chooses. And yet, as he's riding back on the train, he is so tired. He tells Hallie, after we get this bill through, can I just quit? We go back to Shinbone. I just become a lawyer again. He's done with this burden. He's achieved what he wanted, but he doesn't want to be known for that one event. And Hallie she loves this idea. And then the conductor comes in and talks about all the things that they're doing for Stoddard, and he's like, "I'm going to write a letter to thank the railroad company for all that you've done." And the conductor says, "Nothing's too good for the man who shot Liberty Valance."
Yeah,
such a great line.
Yeah,
and the look on Stewart's face, he is never ever going to escape that.
He cannot live it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. That was our review of The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Now our review of Unforgiven.
Was this a film that either of you had seen before now?
No,
No,
I had
yeah.
never seen it.
Yeah, me either.
I have a memory of seeing this in the theater, because I remember when it came out, it was really big. It was Eastwood, going back to the Westerns, and it was such an interesting engagement, given the fact that he was so defined with it. First, in terms of TV, and then in terms of the movies, and it seems in some ways a very different take than you would expect from The Man with No Name or something like that. So, one of the things I like, though, is that he's not at the center of it at first.
Yeah. The setup for it is this attack of the prostitute at the saloon, and she gets all cut up by this guy. And my thought going through this, like you said, is, okay, what does this have to do with Clint Eastwood?
I mean, his is the first name we learn of, because we get the opening crawl. It talks about this unnamed woman's marriage to William Money. But the first thing we see after the crawl and the silhouette that it goes over is, we get Big Whiskey, Wyoming. We get this town on the frontier, and we see this act of violence, and it's one that is outrageous, and it's brutal, and it's one in which you get a sense is the brutality of the West, in that the resolution for it isn't to take the assailant, Quick Mike, and his accomplice Davy, and hang them high, or or even jail them, but they're simply going to be fined. And this is the decisions made by Little Bill Daggett, who the sheriff, played by Gene Hackman, in what was an Oscar-winning performance. And it's such a great performance. I mean, you look at the people he beat out that year. I mean, he beat out Al Pacino for Glengarry Glen Ross. He beat out Jack Nicholson for that iconic performance in A Few Good Men. And it wasn't as showy, but it is so well done. I mean, Hackman is such a master of his craft. He doesn't have to have that you can't handle the truth bombast. He's just so good at. He just comes in there and he just. There's almost like physically expressing a sigh.
Yeah,
gotta deal with this now. And he wants to deal with it with a minimum of fuss, minimum of hassle, and he decides that it's better just to. We're going to compensate, not the women, mind you. We're going to compensate the brothel owner. We're going to compensate Skinny Dubois. He's going to get the payment, not the women. And it's such a devaluing of these women, whom he knows personally, that the women are so outraged, they're going to put a bounty on Quick Mike and Davy.
but it establishes him kind of as a harsh character too.
Mhm.
Not a genteel man, as to, oh, geez, guys, it's okay. You made a little mistake. You can go on. We'll just give you a little fine or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
No, there's a harsh side to him
Mhm.
that they start to establish here, I think.
A brutality.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's an excellent point, because I mean, he really does come across as a person who is just so uncaring
Yeah.
about these things. I mean, he has a job, and he does that job as he's, in the way that he sees it needs to be done, but he's not going to do it with any sort of sense of justice, let alone, compassion. So
I think an interesting thing about this movie is it's much smaller scale than I was expecting. It's one saloon, one sheriff, and as we'll come to see, one lowly pig farmer.
yeah. And it's fascinating, though, the way that it's shot by Eastwood, who directs it, is that, and here I'm thinking of the contrast with The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which is so cramped. You don't have those vistas from Ford. You don't have Monument Valley. You have the town. It's even when you're out at the ranch, it feels like it's on I think it probably was on a soundstage.
I think it was, yeah.
Well, okay, the outside shots weren't. That definitely wasn't a soundstage. But my mom noticed this of the fake cactuses. Like, there's just a few of them in the foreground. The rest is just dirt. It's like, okay.
Yeah, well, Paramount was trying to save money on this film. Mm-hmm. Number one, that's why it was shot in black and white rather than color, because color film was so expensive back in 1962. And that's why John Ford didn't get to go to Monument Valley. Nope, that cost too much to do that. It was most shot there in California.
Yeah. Same with Hitchcock and Psycho. That's why it's black and white.
But here we get full color. We get, the vistas. The way we're introduced to Big Whiskey, it's this small collection of buildings that's in this valley with these, mountains, and it's just so amazingly done. And then we cut to another vista, which is in Kansas, where we have this young man calling himself the Schofield Kid, who approaches a widowed hog farmer named William Money.
Yeah.
And this is where we get the introduction of Eastwood's character, who is not doing well. I mean, he's a single parent. He has these two kids, and you get the impression he's not the world's greatest hog farmer. I mean, William Hormel, he is not. Yeah, he's struggling with apparently the hogs got the fever, and Schofield comes up. He's not interested in buying hogs. He's interested in employing in getting Money's help. Apparently, Money knew was it his father or his uncle or something like that. Apparently, Money had some sort of past experience with a member of Schofield's family, and so the Schofield Kid wants Money's help in collecting this bounty on the two men. And I love how Schofield Kid describes the reason for the bounty. He's describing what happens to the prostitute Delilah, and we've seen Delilah being cut up, and it was pretty bad. She has these scars that heal over the course of the movie. But what he describes is how they cut off her ears, they cut out her eyes. He makes it sound much more horrible than it was.
He's very, very over the top, but he's establishing himself too as a little tough guy.
Yes,
and he's new at this business, and he wants to show him, boy, I'm really big and bad here.
Yeah, and he admits to killing 5 people, which we'll learn further on in the story may not be the actual story.
Bit of a stretch,
yeah. And Money could tell that he's full of it, so he says, kid, I don't, I'm going to pass. And then the kid rides off, and
there's a shot as he's riding off where he's watching him right away on the sun, or there's no sunset. He's watching him right away on the horizon, and he's like standing by his fence, just staring at him, and you can just feel that sense of he wants to be in that old life again. And it reminded me of the binary sunset scene from Star Wars, where he's just staring off into the sunset, and it's like boo ba doo ba doo ba doo. and music rises. There's no music rise there, but you get that sense that he wants to be back in that old life.
And he ultimately chooses to be. And when you consider what he's abandoning his kids. Now, I mean, when the Schofield kid shows up, it's every parent's nightmare where the kids find out that, you know, their father's not a saint or is not a stern figure of authority. He had kind of this questionable past. Did you really kill people, Dad?
Yeah.
But he makes the decision. I mean, it's a practical decision in the sense that he needs the money. The hog farm is failing, but to me as a dad, I'm watching this. It's like he's leaving his kids behind.
Yeah,
and they were young children too.
Yeah. I mean, and he's basically telling him, I'll be back in a couple weeks. And
as he's preparing for this, like he's shooting at the can on the stump.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get a single shot.
Yes.
And then he comes in with a shotgun and blows it away. And then
it really underscores how out of practice he is.
Yeah, and the mounting the horse as well. Yeah. The horse just keeps turning around and he can't get up on the horse.
But it's fascinating how it's so un-Eastwood.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, it's contrary to every other Western he had made, and this was his last one.
Yeah.
And he comes across as this in the beginning. It just fascinates me. See, Eastwood is a weak, can't do anything right, can't shoot, can't ride a horse, can't even get on the horse anymore.
Yeah, he's so out of practice.
Yeah.
He's feeling his age. He's not the man he used to be.
And he does it so well.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he wins an Oscar for this, but unfortunately it's not for acting.
Yeah.
So, but then we cut back to Big Whiskey. And this is when we find out that Skitty has found out about the bounty. And so he goes and he informs Little Bill. And we see Little Bill, building this house for himself. We learned he's not the world's greatest carpenter.
Yeah.
And I love how when Skinny Dubois tells Bill this, and there's a sense you see like this again. It's like, oh, I can't believe I have to deal with this, because he knows what this is going to bring.
Yeah,
and so you get a sense that it's not just that he's a brutal man. He's also he has a familiarity with that life, and he's dealt with these people in the past, and so he knows he has to kind of get on top of this. And the only way he knows to get on top of it is to be brutal. And that's what we're going to see throughout the movie. I mean, Hackman does such a great job. And this is, I'm thinking, another interesting thing when you look at how it compares with The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, about how it's another distortion of the law. How we have Appleyard as the law as ineffectual, and here we see the law as just brute force. And in which an ordinance becomes the justification for all these horrific acts that Bill will commit. And it's not, Bill and his deputies. All the horrific acts that I can think of in the movie are committed by the Big Whiskey, sheriff's department, are committed by Little Bill himself.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that brutality again.
Yeah.
Which is contra to what you see in most Westerns, where it's the stand-up sheriff. And this is the total reverse of that.
Yeah.
Where he comes across as, where's this guy going to go with all this? Is this really the bad guy?
Yeah.
For the good guy and the bad guy, should he have the black hat on?
Yeah.
In this Western.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what color his hat is now. It might have, did he even? Oh, brown? Yeah, he wore a hat. It might have been white. I don't know.
I thought it was brown.
Yeah, I think it was brown.
Might be. Yeah.
A bit more neutral. So.
Yeah.
Just to throw you off.
Bit little shades of gray. So you,
Then we cut back to Clint Eastwood's character, and he rides to the farm of Ned Logan, played by Morgan Freeman. And this is where Logan's another man from his past. He goes there initially. I mean, ostensibly he's there to ask Ned to look on his kids, maybe go over there and check out to make sure things are okay. But there's an interesting subtext that the way he's describing what the reason he's going, the reason he's describing Delilah's wounds, which is even more exaggerated than that of the Schofield kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is he's asking for help without asking for help. And it's something that, interestingly enough, Ned's wife seems to pick up on sooner because, and I love the scene where Ned and William Money go into Ned's house, and you see his Ned's wife, who's Native American, who she goes up to Money's horse and she sees that shotgun there. She touches the stock of it.
Yeah.
And it's like she knows that, nothing good is going to come of this.
And she never says a word.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Just a very strong, silent, strong woman in the background.
Yeah. She acts with her presence.
Yeah.
Yeah. But after, so Money says, can you check on the kids? And Ned says, why don't I come with you? And Money doesn't exactly say, no, that's okay. I got this.
Yeah.
But the Schofield kid, Money, Ned, they're not the only ones that are, coming for the bounty. Then we cut to this train where we have a group of men who are discussing the recent shooting of President James Garfield. And among the passengers engaged in this debate is English Bob, Richard Harris' character, who is this notorious gunfighter who has brought with him his biographer. and I love how Richard Harris plays this. I mean, he's this bombastic character.
Yeah.
Who the bombast, I mean, he can back up the bombast. So he's sitting here, sort of denigrating the United States, and one of the passengers is like, how dare you talk smack about, America like that? And then the guy said, no, this is English Bob. You don't want to be saying that to English Bob. So they have a shooting contest, and Bob, wins it, of course. But not
a gunfight, but a shooting contest of birds off the side.
Yeah, I love the way he says it. I'll shoot for the Queen, and you'll shoot for whomever, because he knows he can still be dismissive and arrogant, and these guys have to take it because they're terrified of him, because he is a man with a reputation for violence, one that has been written up in this this book, The Duke of Death, which can be bought for like $1.99 at your nearest drugstore or something like that.
Which is a lot back then.
Yeah, exactly. So they alight at Big Whiskey. They're coming into town, and the biography, Beauchamp, played by Saul Rubinek, he sees the sign and Bob just dismisses it. The sign saying, no guns allowed in Big Whiskey. That's how Bill's going to deal with this. He's going to ban the guns, and so which is actually not an understandable solution. If a guy's carrying a gun in violation of the ordinance, they must therefore be there to do no good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's strutting around town. He makes no. I mean, he see the deputies see him with the gun, and they're like, you have to turn your guns. And Bob, he just I don't have any guns.
Yeah.
And I love how the way he does it. He says it, and at the same time he's doing absolutely nothing to conceal the fact that he's carrying it.
It's clearly visible right there in his
flip about it.
Yeah. And he's kind of like, hey, well, I have a gun. You could try taking it from me.
Yeah.
It won't work. And the deputies, they then go and they arm up. They have the interesting conversation about whether or not to go talk to Bill about this. And I think one of the deputies is like, no, we don't need to talk to Bill about this. And they kind of this interesting exchange. They imply he's disengaged. But then when Bob leaves the barbershop with Beauchamp, and they're confronted by the deputies, Bill is there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fascinating how they instantly greet each other by name. Hi, Bob. Hi, Bill.
Yeah.
They know each other.
Right. Very well.
And this is where you get the sense, and again, Richard Harris is such an amazing actor. You instantly tell he knows that he's in trouble. And you had that great exchange where, they're kind of, they're like, how you been type of thing. And then, Bill talks about the ordinance, and Bob turns over the gun. And then he thinks he's gotten away with it. He turns away, and Bill says, I have that side piece of yours too. And then once Bob is forced to give that up, Bill just beats him senseless. And oh my gosh, this is such a brutal scene. And it's such it's such an unmanly fight because Bob is defenseless. Bill's got 3 other guys with guns.
Yeah.
And he is just, he's intimidated. You get that great scene where when Bob and Beauchamp first step out of the barbershop and all the guns are there and Beauchamp wets himself.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he says to someone, "Don't step in the wet."
Yeah, exactly. Don't step in that puddle there.
Yeah.
So, and Bill's doing this, and he's doing it basically to make an example out of Bob. And so he beats up Bob, on the street in full view of the town, especially the women, making it clear that he will not tolerate this. And it's just so humiliating to Bob. And so, as you were pointing out, Phil, just so brutal.
So brutal. And it makes you want to hate Gene Hackman again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's really establishing that. Like, you don't like him at all.
Yeah.
Just get out of here. Somebody shoot him.
Yeah.
Even though he's he's in that traditional role.
Yeah.
Of being the good guy, the man of law, and he's actually got. But you also see a bit of sort of Bill's, I don't want to say quite cowardice, but the fact that he waits until he's not looking for a fair fight.
Yeah,
he's looking. He's going to completely disarm Bob, and then he's just going to humiliate Bob.
He's going to take advantage however he can. Yeah,
and in a way that conceivably risks Bob's life. So we cut back to Money and Ned, who are riding to catch up to the Schofield kid, and then they're all of a sudden they are being shot at, but not.
And it's interesting when you cut back to them after showing these, like if this happens a couple times in the movie, of after you see this horrible act from Bill, and you cut back to our heroes, it gives this heroic feel of, oh, here come the heroes to save the day. You're going to see it's not going to quite play out that way, but yeah.
But they're kind of being, their shots being fired around them, shall we say. And this is when they, encounter the Schofield kid. And this is where you start to get a sense maybe the Schofield kid isn't all he's cracked up to be. not just that he hasn't killed 5 men, but that, he seems to be kind of shooting at random and everything. And you had that you had that exchange where, Money makes it clear that he's going to join the Schofield kid. They're going to split the bounty, but he's going to do it with Ned. And he basically says, you get the impression that the Schofield kid, he realizes he doesn't have a choice in the matter and he needs money. So and of course we find out why he needs money because he's nearsighted.
Yeah. He can't see.
I can't think of another Western where that's a thing. They're always these men of physical ability. They always seem to have 20/20 vision when they do these things. And here we're seeing, the idea that, the idea of a nearsighted gunfighter. Yeah. Of course, there's a fix to that. It's called wearing glasses. But is there a gunfighter who wore glasses?
I can't think of one.
So again, it's part of that. I think that it's better for him to enlist the help of William Money and not wear glasses than to try to do it on his own with a pair of spectacles. But then we cut back to the Big Whiskey, and it's night. It's in the jail, and there we see Little Bill holding court before Bob and Beauchamp, who are initially they're both in jail cells, but then Bill lets out Beauchamp because he has this audience. He starts telling all these tales. He's deconstructing Bob in front of his biographer, and I like how he starts that. He talks about the Duck of Death.
Yeah, the Duck of Death rather than the Duke.
Yeah. And Beauchamp, it's like he does it the first time in front of the barbershop, and he says the Duck of Death, and Beauchamp corrects him. And the look that Bill gives him is like, well, I know, but I just sort of he does it again in the jail cell, and Beauchamp corrects him again.
Yeah.
He hasn't quite gotten
he hasn't picked up on it. Yeah.
but Beauchamp quickly, soon discovers that the tales that English Bob has told him were all false.
Right.
Talks about this 2-gun guy and says, well, the guy didn't have 2 guns because that he only had the 1 gun. We called him that because he also was very well endowed, and how had he had 2 guns, he actually might have survived his gun battle with Bob because his Colt went off in his hand when the 2 men confronted each other, and it's a great scene because you're seeing this shift in loyalty with Beauchamp. Mm-hmm. He's there he really wants to tell the tales of the West, and English Bob has told him some great tales, got a book out, but now he's finding out the tales are not true, and he's getting great tales from Bill.
Sees a shinier object.
Yes. He sees an opportunity.
Yeah.
And Bill polishes it up so nicely when he gives Beauchamp a revolver, and he says, shoot, you can shoot me. Here are the keys. You can let Bob out. You 2 can be on your way. And he knows Beauchamp won't, shoot him. Mm-hmm. But Beauchamp says, what if I give the gun to Bob? And Bill, and this is such a gutsy move. He's like, yeah, sure, give it to Bob. And it's like, and Bob knows it's a setup. And at the moment that Bob declines to take the chance, that's when Beauchamp he's on Team Little Bill from now on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I thought he was a goner in that scene.
Yeah. It's a great subversion of expectations because you're expecting a shootout. Because that's what these men do. And the way that Harris does it by just simply putting his hands on the bars, just kind of resting his his
I was talking about the biographer Beauchamp.
Oh.
I thought this is a trick to get him to I don't know. He wants to kill someone in this scene.
Who, Bill?
Little Bill.
So and the next morning that transfer loyalty is complete when Bob's being run out of town and Bill's saying, well, Beauchamp's going to stay with me, and he's standing there on the porch with little Bill as Bob is leaving town on his own. It's interesting as he's cursing out the town as he's leaving. He does so in a different accent, and this is something that I read. Harris went to Eastwood about and said, what if as I'm leaving, I use kind of a lower class accent. So it kind of underscores just how how accurate Little Bill was about the whole Duck of Death.
Yeah, how he was how he's a fraud.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all a pretense. Yeah. He's just a Cockney. He's he's just a thug. He's all dressed up. He's basically kind of an older version of the Schofield Kid.
Yeah.
So
Cockney Dumbledore.
Yeah. So Bob gets on the train and he's leaving town. And I love the transfer that takes place because as the train is leaving, it passes by Money and Ned and the kid who are riding into town. And it's raining and it's miserable, and they go to the brothel, and the kid goes upstairs to kind of let the ladies know that he's there. And Ned, maybe not the most faithful husband, decides he's going to go up and
enjoy his time while he's there.
Exactly. And that means that Money, who is ill, he has a fever, he's sitting there alone when Little Bill and his deputies show up, because they Little Bill's been told guys are in town, they got guns. And he doesn't recognize William Money, but he does disarm him. And then he does exactly the same thing he did to English Bob, beats the heck out of him. And it's no allowance for, the fact that Money's sick. He's just he literally kicks him out of the place. Just, kicks him multiple times and then throws him out. And this is a sacrifice on Bill's, on Money's part, because it gives Ned and the kid a chance to get out from the second floor.
Yeah.
So And it gives you a sense as to how there is a certain, perhaps a little bit of nobility about money.
Mm-hmm.
That he is not quite the same figure he once was.
Yeah, he still doesn't want to totally give in to his old self.
Yes,
at this point,
which is nicely symbolized by his refusal to drink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that we had mentioned was the fact that he's constantly referencing that when as he's going through throughout the film about how he was a brutal man who drank heavily, and it was his beloved wife, who weaned him off those things, who got him to find a better way. And while he is preparing to engage in violence, he is trying to avoid that. And there's that great scene in the brothel right before Bill shows up, where he's got the bottle in front of him.
Yeah. Boy, he's just sitting there looking at it. He brings it up like he wants to drink it, but he can't do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He can't do it, and just kind of lightly pushes it back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet there is no acknowledgement, in a sense, of, from Bill that maybe money is not as bad as English Bob. And he just basically, beats him up and throws him out.
There's a real sense at this point that, like, how is he going to do this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Like, in most other, I guess they kind of do that in most other Westerns, where they make the odds so high that there's so many bad guys or whatever that they have to fight, and it's just one guy gathering a posse or whatever the thing is.
Yeah.
But in this one, it's just him
Mm-hmm.
and these two other guys, and you get this obvious sense that Bill is such a bad guy. There's going to be this showdown between them at the end, and it's like, how is he ever going to do that? And I wrote in my notes, more than any other movie, I got the sense, how will he be able to rise to meet the challenge?
And it's interesting foreshadowing that he's the one that has to rise to it, that the kid and Ned ultimately don't prove up to that.
Yeah.
So, but the kid and Ned do manage to recover money, and they go hide out in a barn.
Mm-hmm.
And so you get this scene where, the Ned and the kiddos are putting it there. They're taking their payment early from the women who are providing
services.
Also, they're providing food and like medicine,
okay.
but they were also providing services. Yes, although money declines the services.
Yeah,
and you have that really interesting scene where he meets Delilah, and they have this very interesting exchange where she's offering herself to him, and he declines, but he does so in a way that is probably the most gentle way that any man in the movie has treated her, where he tries to make her feel good. Like, well, it's, I have my wife at home, is back at Kansas, and I have to, I'm being true to her. He really lets her off easily, because you get the impression she doesn't have a lot of self-esteem because she feels bad about, the way she's been defaced. I mean, honestly, I thought, she looked beautiful still.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But she's really feeling what, Skinny Dubois told her, which is that she's worthless now that she's been cut up, and she's only good for sweeping, which is, of course, why he's the one that has to get compensated for it, because she's a little more than an employee on contract, and he wants to get the value of the contract.
Yeah,
and
but money lets her down so gently, because he doesn't even want to draw attention to the fact that maybe she's somewhat marred at this point. Yeah.
There's a great line that he says, "You ain't ugly like me. It's just that we both got scars." It's so great. The subtext to that, like, he's got so many scars from the people he's killed.
Yeah, the emotional scars in there. Yeah.
Yeah. He's there. I mean, he definitely needs the money. It's what's driving him. But he's kind of like, I just want to do this and be done. I think it's this idea that he can just do it a little bit.
Yeah, one time and I'm out of here.
Exactly.
Yeah, and let me return to the life that my wife taught me.
Yeah.
Is much better.
And maybe he doesn't have to do anything, because you get the impression maybe this is why he brought Ned along. He brought Ned along to do the things that he couldn't. So when you have the first assassination, which is of Davy, it's Ned who's carrying it out at first. And so they're Davy's with some of the other cowboys. I think they're rounding up a cow or something like that, or they're branding a cow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Davy's on his horse, and Ned shoots him. He hits the horse. Now, we've established that Ned's a good shot. So there's this astonishment when he misses. And Money encourages him to take it. The kid's useless. He can't see for...
Yeah, he can't see the guy.
So it's Ned has to do it. And so Ned, reloads the rifle, but he can't bring himself to pull the trigger. I mean, at this point, Davy, he's on the ground. His leg is broken. He's injured. But Ned, and so he's should be an easy target, but Ned can't bring himself to pull that trigger. He ultimately decides that he is too changed to be that person. And so Money has to step up and play that role. And that is such a well done scene.
Yeah. And he's like calling for water.
Yeah.
And they just drag it out the most they possibly can and make it where this is not a satisfying kill. This you feel the pain of this death that you almost don't want it to happen.
And the fact that even Money feels the pain.
Yeah.
Because when Davy's crying out for water, Money says to them, for God's sakes, just give him some water.
Yeah.
I won't shoot you, I promise. Yeah. And you see, Ned sitting there looking miserable. The kid's the only one who's hopping up and down, but then he's the only one who hasn't seen this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in a sense, for him, it's still just, something that's being described to him. It's another story he's being told, even as it's happening around him.
And here we see again, the typical antagonist in the typical Western showing all the gentle signs as opposed to the law, one more time. And now we've carried it, to another degree. Yeah. And by adding Morgan Freeman to it.
And you see that gentleness reflected in the fact that Money lets Ned off the hook. Ned says, I can't do this. And Money says, well, go back to Kansas. Yeah. And you're even going to get a share, even though you didn't actually kill Davy.
Yeah.
No, he's very, I think he feels bad about, he understands what Ned's going through.
Yeah. And he feels bad about having tried to draw him into this as well.
Yeah. He's going through it himself.
Yeah. I'm sorry, pal. I didn't want to do this to you.
So Ned, of the three of them, Ned is going to be the one who walks away with this without blood on his hands. Yeah. I mean, yes, he injures Davy, but he's not the one that fired the shot
final round.
Yeah, that was Money. But then we find out that Ned's caught as he's leaving. He's captured by Littleville's deputies, who then bring him to town. Mm-hmm. And Ned, is trying to, initially he says he's nothing to do with this. He's just just riding through. And so Little Bill beats him for information. Mm-hmm. And when you consider that this is that, you have, a black man, slavery is not 15 years gone. And he is strapped to a jail cell and being whipped by Bill.
Yeah, there's something about the imagery of that that's just immediately hits you.
Yeah.
And it's also fascinating when you look at how Bill is doing this, and he's not enjoying it, but there's no sense of regret. And it's nothing like what you see in Beauchamp's face, because he's there taking notes. It's not what you see in the deputies, who are very uncomfortable with it as well. It's just, again, the brutality.
Yeah.
I mean, he doesn't relish it, but
it's just every day.
Yeah.
Just what I do.
Yeah. And so he's going to he whips Ned for hours. He gets all these details, and then he calls in some of the prostitutes to compare stories. Mm-hmm. So it's like he does this beating just so he can expose Ned as a liar, and then beat him some more until he gets the truth. Yeah. And it's just, you just get a sense of just, Bill's not a nice guy.
No, he's not.
All the ways he could have handled this, he chose the way that was going to be the most brutal.
Yeah, and we see that right after, Ned and Money are out there, feeling sorry and feeling bad for what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And now here's the sheriff just I don't care. This is what we do.
No regrets.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's desperate though to find money and the kid, and because he doesn't know that what they're going to do is they're going to go find Quick Mike, who's holding up at the ranch, guarded by a deputy. There's also the other the other ranch hands, and they're staking out the ranch house, and they're waiting for Quick Mike to reveal himself by going to the outhouse.
Mm-hmm.
Which is I think a very clever way of doing it. Yeah, man's got to go at some point.
That's right.
Yeah.
Although Quick Mike demonstrates he's got pretty good capacity, because he's in there all night, and it's only in the morning when he goes out there, and it's the kid who steps up to kill him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a great scene because it's not the smooth confrontation that you're expecting, because there's actually two outhouses adjacent, but right next to each other. And he opens the door of one of them and it's empty.
Yeah.
Quick Mike's in the other one. And when he's kind of processing this, the deputy comes out of the ranch house and he sees the kid and he starts screaming, "Assassins! Assassins!" and so the kid has the time to open the other door, and there's Quick Mike who's still on the pot.
Yeah.
And he just, I mean, it's such
Dies in the most dignified way.
yeah. I'm still waiting to find the person who says, when I go, I hope I'm on the can, you're scrambling in vain for my gun.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one where, given what he did, it's not exactly lament his death. It's definitely it's satisfying.
Totally degrading.
Exactly, it's very degrading. So.
Yeah.
But you also have the way that the kid and money escape is really neat, because it gets to, again, this idea that violence is something that people talk about, but actually doing it is different. So, the deputy and the ranch hands, they're all firing as money and kid are running to get to the horses, but they're all like firing wildly. You never get a sense that money and the kid are in danger of being shot.
Yeah.
And
like they're purposely missing them.
Yeah. And money tells the kid, shoot back at them. And the kid says, I can't hit them, but it doesn't matter, because they're being shot at enough that they're going to focus on preserving themselves over catching them. Money gets this. He knows about the effect of violence. And that's why later, when you see the kid drinking, money is like, he knows what the kid's going through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is when we find out that, shocker, he didn't kill 5 people.
Yeah. And he's bragging about this whole thing he just did. He's like, yeah, I shot him on the pot. I shot him 3 times. And then he gets to a certain point and he just breaks down.
Totally
and
breaks down. Yeah.
You can tell, like, he's not feeling this. He's trying to overcome something. And then Clint Eastwood's like, take a drink, kid. And then
he's got that line, which is one of my all-time favorite lines. It's a hell of a thing killing a man.
Yeah.
Take away all he's got and all he's ever going to have.
Mm-hmm.
Money understood that from the first scene.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's taken the experience of killing someone for the kid to realize just how serious it is.
Yeah.
And how all that bragging, that's not something that a real killer does.
Yeah, and it's interesting that this movie might be more realistic, and not in the sense of the set design or the writing or whatever, but like just the way that it treats death in this movie is more realistic than maybe any movie that I've seen. It's not, you're popping off this guy, then this guy, then this guy, and we gotta get to the bad guy, and then this death is satisfying. None of the deaths seem satisfying. Yeah. Well, maybe one that we'll get to.
One that we're coming to, exactly.
Yeah.
So.
No, but it exhibits the finality of it.
Yeah, yes. It does.
In other Westerns, it's just, it's like popcorn. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Popping up. But here, it's not. There aren't that many deaths.
And it makes you feel every single one.
Yes.
Yeah. And there are even fewer people who have the, ability to actually, to engage in killing. That's one of the things that makes Money such a unique figure, and something which you recognize by the end of the movie. But Money's done. He's done what he's needed to do. He has killed the men. He can now just take the money and go, and the money is delivered by one of the working women, And this is when he discovers that Ned didn't ride to Kansas, that he was captured, and that little Bill has whipped him to death and has made him, his corpse, a display to serve as a deterrent. And this is when Money takes a drink. And
which I didn't catch at all. I have to rewatch that to see just like how it affects you emotionally. Because I very much picked up he's not drinking all throughout this, but I didn't see him
finally
take a drink.
Does,
yeah.
That's when he is like it's like that's when you know it's going to end badly.
That was the straw that broke the camel's back right there.
He was willing to ride out of town and just leave the town as it was. But with Ned's death, the one member of their party who didn't kill anybody, he is determined to do justice for his friend.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And
also, he's Morgan Freeman.
And he is Morgan Freeman.
That's right.
and he asked the kid for his revolver, and the kid gives it to him. I'm not going to kill anybody anymore. And Money waits till nightfall, and he rides into town.
And it's interesting at this point. I nerded out and paused the movie. I'm like, this is definitely beginning of Act 3.
Yes.
There's only 20 minutes left, so this is a very short Act 3.
It is. And I think, and I wonder if it's short because it kind of, again, underscores that when a person who actually knows how to use violence uses it, it's not a drawn out thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
to give reference though, like usually for a 2-hour movie, 30 minutes is devoted to the third act. It's 30 for the first, an hour for Act 2, and then 30 minutes for third act.
Mm-hmm. So he rides into town, and the men in the town are at Skinny Dubois' saloon because they're going to form a posse. Now that Davy and Quick Mike are dead, Bill's going to track down Money and the kid, and he's gonna kill them. So he thinks he's gonna be chasing them.
Right.
And there's almost this festive atmosphere where he's sitting there talking about how, we're gonna pay for we're gonna pay for this drink, and I'm gonna treat you to this drink, but after that you're on your own. But this idea that we're gonna chase them, and he's so dismissive. We're gonna chase these skunks, and I love the way that Eastwood shot. This to me is where Eastwood wins his Oscar for Best Director. The way that he does this entire scene where they're all, kind of joking around about this and cheering at Bill, giving them drinks and all that. And the camera's panning back. It actually cuts to initially Annie, the head of the prostitutes. She sees Money first. And then you see Beauchamp sees Money.
Yeah.
And the expression on his face, and Rubik is so awesome in this scene where he's kind of like brightening up. He's actually going to see for the first time all these things that he's until now only been told.
He's going to see the whole story himself this time.
Exactly. Yeah. He's going to be there to take notes and witness it as it happens. And it's panning back, and then you see the it's pans where you get Eastwood's back, and it's only Annie and Beauchamp who sees him, and until he cocks his shotgun and stops the conversation.
Yeah.
And that's when justice has finally arrived.
Right.
And who does Money kill first? He kills Skinny Dubois, because Skinny Dubois is the one who has Ned's body on display in front of his saloon. And it's such a great scene where Dubois is telling Money how he gets the saloon. Like, it matters. I bought it for $1,000 off this guy. He doesn't care. He's gonna kill him anyway. And then and Bill has lost control of the situation. He's trying hold on. Blammo. Dubois is dead.
Yeah.
And Bill's like, you just shot an unarmed man. It's that great line. Well, he should have armed himself. He's going to be putting my friend Ned on display. And you get the first, this is the second of 3 confrontations that Bill and Money have with each other. The first one was earlier when Money is sick. Now for the first time, he actually knows who Money is, and it's more even.
And as soon as Beauchamp hears Will Money's name,
Yeah.
there's this sparkle in his eyes of, oh, I found a shinier object.
Yeah. Especially the way that it happens where Little Bill's like, you're William Money, you're a killer of women and children. And Money's like, yes, I've killed women and children. I've killed about everything that's crawled and walked. And now I'm here to kill you, Little Bill. And I love how they make Little Bill nuanced enough to where even though he's facing his death, he's not scared.
No,
he doesn't
he's
break
not.
down.
Still very arrogant about the whole thing.
He still thinks he has some sort of agency. And so he's going to tell. So he tells his men, as soon as he shoots me, you shoot him down like the mangy dog he is. And there's that great moment of tension where lowers the shotgun, pause, click, and he spits out misfire. And there's this great callback to the scene in the jail where Bill is pontificating about what it takes to be a successful gunfighter. And he says, it's not the quick draw, it's about keeping a cool head. And in a sense, Bill is proven right because he loses his cool because the adrenaline rush hits him. He's like, misfire, kill him. He tries to pull out his gun and he's trying to do it quickly. And Money has the presence to throw the now empty shotgun at him, which distracts Bill, kind of throws off his aim long enough for Money to crouch down, pull out his gun and shoot Bill in the gut. And then it's this wild shootout scene as the deputies, all these people, they start pulling out their guns and they're all just firing. It's just chaotic shootout. And Money is the only one who has the presence of mind to, to target the deputies.
He stays calm and does it. Each one of them with deliberation. He
kills two of them. Then two of the other deputies try to run out. He shoots one in the back as he's getting out. And then he says, anybody who isn't here, who doesn't want to die, you go out the back, and they flee.
They're all gone.
Yeah. He's Money is the one true killer in that room once Bill is shot down. Nobody else really has that coolness that Bill knows is really the key to winning a confrontation like that. And then what does Money do? Goes to the bar and gets a drink.
Yeah.
That's who he is. That he's kind of embraced who he once was. But the bar is not empty because you still have Beauchamp in there.
Yeah.
He buried under a pile of corpses. Like guy throws off the corpse and Money's getting ready to maybe shoot him. And it's like, no, I'm not a gunfighter. I'm a writer. And he shows him, waves his notebook at him or something like that, and he starts interviewing. And initially,
what was it like to just shoot all those guys right now, 2 seconds ago?
Like you shot him first because Bill says you always shoot the best guy, and kind of Money pontificates about how he feels, and it's like it's the most. It's I think it's the truest assessment. It's luck. I mean, at the end, how is it that Money survives, being outgunned, 6, 7, 8, 9 to 1? It was, he had kept a cool head, but at the end of the day, it was luck. I mean, because even when you're firing randomly in all directions, you're likely to get hit at some point.
Exactly.
But then he gets a little tired of being interviewed by Beauchamp. So who'd you shoot next? Well, I know I'm going to shoot last.
and during this conversation, we see that Little Bill isn't dead.
Yes.
So this is suspense right here. You tell the audience, bad guy's still alive, and these guys are just having this conversation.
Again, excellent direction the way that Eastwood does it. How it's very subtly done. It's done in a way to where we see it, but it's not done in a way to where he's doing anything that is plausibly not being picked up by Money and Beauchamp. Beauchamp, at least he thinks Little Bill's already dead.
Yeah,
but he's not. And it's only when Bill is cocking his gun that Money realizes that he isn't dead, and so he disrupts the shot.
Yeah,
and that's when they had that great final confrontation. And I just love that line that Bill has. I don't deserve this. I was building a house. and that great response, deserves got nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And then he blows away Bill, and then he blows away the other deputy that was still dying. It wasn't dying fast enough, I guess.
Crouched or slumped up against the door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then he's going to make his escape, and he's shouting out about how he will, anybody tries to shoot at him, he will, gun them down. He'll gun their wife down. He'll burn their house down. And it's really fascinating because it's sheer bluff. Because if he gets shot, it's not like, this isn't a zombie movie.
Yeah.
He's not going to track them down and do it after he's been shot.
It's kind of just a psychological thing.
Yes.
That he's got this reputation to go off of, and then
because when he comes out,
he just did. So
because when he comes out, a deputy's got a bead on him.
Yeah.
And Beauchamp's next to the deputy, and one of the other guys is like, shoot him. And the deputy's like, I can't shoot him. Gives the guy, basically he's kind of like a Appleyard. I ain't gonna do this. He's too scared. And money rides off, and we find out he goes back to the farm, and then he leaves the farm, and that's the end of the movie. Yeah. So well, it's kind of almost like it's a little anticlimactic, but in that sense, there's no grand finale, because that's not, you can't really gussy up that brutality.
Yeah, that might kind of be the point of like they've shown death and murder in this movie, in the unglossy way that they have, where it's just drawn out and not fun at all. Yeah. And then that's how they end it too.
And the way he rides off, it's not into the sunset. It's not with majestic vistas. It's just pouring rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just so.
I love that end shot where it's just downpouring, and it's like it's barely exposed. Like you can barely see any of it's almost black, and then it holds for the longest time after he goes out of the shot, and then it fades out.
Yeah.
So that is our review of Unforgiven. Every once in a while, two films will share a bond to transcend time, space, and even genre. These similarities go down to their DNA. So let's dissect and deconstruct, compare and contrast. It's time to go crisscross.
Crisscross.
Okay, so the biggest parallel I saw between these two movies is it's really revisiting the past.
Mm-hmm.
The way that they do it in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is that great opener where they're just coming into town at its modern, air quotes, modern times, but it's the present, and they're going through town, and it's all built up, and it doesn't look very Western at all, and you just get this sense that something happened here, and so that's how they play it in there. And then the way that they do it in Unforgiven is he's constantly being reminded of his past, of what he did, and everybody's like, is it true that you blah 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 blah, and he can't escape his past, basically, even though he's a different man now.
Yet we never see it like we do in the first film. Mm-hmm. They never actually show it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think it's a nice way of illustrating another commonality that exists. It's not just the connection with the past, but how so much of that past is mythologized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, the theme is more overt in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, with that, famous line about when, legend becomes fact, print a legend, which is that so much of what you see in these movies in Unforgiven are these people that are trading on these reputations that are largely fictionalized. You have, English Bob, who is, such a fake. And you have little Bill, who ends up, believing a lot of his own press. And so much of money's victory is one for him even before he fires a shot, because he has such a fearsome reputation. I mean, that was where Little Bill did himself such a disservice, because when he's describing, you're William Money, the man who's killed women and children, he's terrified of all the other people in the saloon by who he is.
He's run off half his help.
Exactly. Nobody wants to face that. But it gets to how so much of what, and I think this is where, is the theme of the revisionism that we see in the Westerns, for which The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance is credited with having started, which is how so much of the West is more that imagery, that story,
Mm-hmm.
the dime novels, the
Wild West shows, they took worldwide.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even when the West was taking place, I mean, the real thing was there, and Buffalo Bill was already, performing in the legendary version in London, and and both of them kind of reflect upon the amount of mythologizing, which is consequential to the West. Mm-hmm. I mean, in both cases, it's not a matter of, well, that's not how it happened. It was in the end the myth that proves to be more significant.
Yeah, and
it's really fascinating how both of them develop that in different ways. And in one, it's sort of the stories of the West and how they define what they are and how at variance they are with truth. The other one is about the power that these stories have.
Yeah,
to where they ultimately prove to be a greater driver of people's actions than a sober assessment of the situation that they're in.
Yeah. Revisiting the past, like he kind of literally goes back to his past.
Well, it's interesting how both men are, both of the central characters are ashamed of their past in different ways. With Money, it's that he's seen the error of his ways. He's like Liberty Valance if Liberty Valance found love. He's not going to be that evil person anymore. He wants to renounce. He wants to put it behind him. He only does it for turns to it again for survival, and even then he thinks he can do so on terms that will keep him somewhat clean, and ultimately he can't. Mm-hmm. And starts the same way, is that he has all these great achievements of which he is justifiably proud of. He makes the state.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's that violent past that he is known for, and it, he's miserable about this.
Yeah, they both have kind of sad endings in that way. Yeah,
they do.
Yeah, it's almost a tragedy in both cases.
Yeah, they're both of the films convey the fact that both men prosper in the end. Because we find there's that at the end crawl in Unforgiven, we find out that he's rumored to have prospered in dry goods,
right?
And of course, we see Ransom Stoddard. We first learn about him as this successful statesman before we find out about that past. But that success is immaterial to this association with violence that both these men know deep down, is who they are.
Yeah.
So.
And it's interesting. Both of these characters feel like they are not equipped for the battle that they have to undergo. Mm-hmm. One of them's a has-been, and the other one is a never-been. Mm-hmm. So a pig farmer and a tenderfoot, in the case of Liberty Valance. Well, not Liberty Valance himself, but the man who shot Liberty Valance.
Ransom Stoddard.
Ransom, yeah. So they both have to kind of build themselves up to that confrontation at the end, and it's interesting the way that Unforgiven does it, or at least all of it, or most of its storytelling, I feel brings a realism to it, that like the way it treats its deaths and the way that it treats like his capability. He doesn't just, as soon as he straps on a gun, have the capability to take on this guy. He has to hard win it throughout the movie.
To work at it again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Money, it's not so much a capability to, do the violence. It's more about the capability to try to do it in ways that will not involve him becoming the man he doesn't want to be.
Yeah. Convince himself to do it. Yeah.
And in that sense, he fails.
Yeah.
Because, and again, the drinking is a great symbol of failure to do so.
And I noticed neither of them drank. That was a parallel, but the way that their third acts went in were exactly the same. Of a friend close to them was murdered or near murdered, and that ignites their desire to get revenge for that and go kill Liberty Valance or to go kill Little Bill.
It unlocks their ability to be violent, so to speak. So,
yeah, I found an interesting parallel that both films were both directors' last Westerns. That was the last Western that John Ford did, and he had made 14 with John Wayne plus others. And then this was Eastwood's last Western.
That may be why they're so deconstructionist, because they're looking back on their legacy, and they're like, what does this all mean?
One that's very much built upon their success in Westerns as actors and directors. Well, directors both, but also actor in Eastwood's sense. So.
And then to go back to the note that I made when we were talking about Liberty Valance, the sparse use of music. And in this one, I was a musician. I'm sorry, I was a musician for many, many years. So I watched the music or listened to the music very carefully.
What did you play?
I played keyboards and sang.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Cool.
And they used a lot of background music in the Eastwood film. But again, only one or two places in Liberty Valance.
Yeah, and the music, and I'm struggling to recall the music in Unforgiven. Those is pretty minimalistic.
Exactly.
It's not your soaring orchestral. It's more like
it's
a guitar.
Not huge. No. It's just very light strings, things like that. Make the poignant moments more memorable.
One other thing that really stood out for me in the comparison was, and this is something we haven't really addressed in when we were reviewing the movies, was the agency that women have in both movies. And this strikes me as being something that's very perhaps atypical in how we think about Westerns. Westerns are very much of a masculine genre.
Yeah.
And yet in both of these films, and this may be another factor in why we can regard both of them as revisionists, women have a lot of power. In the sense, Hallie has the power of a choice, and it's one that she ultimately exercises, and it proves to be it defines the outcome of the film. In Unforgiven, it is the choice of the women to hire killers to enact the justice that they've been denied that drives the film. And so we're seeing how we have these women in the Old West, and you could probably speak to this more knowledgeably than I could, Phil, who are not simply passive objects. They're not simply wives and helpmates. These are women who are living their lives, and who are going to, who are as active, participants in the West as the men.
Yeah, I mean, when you watch our madam in Unforgiven, she was very defiant sometime when she's yelling out the window. I mean, she showed a strength, but these women had to be extremely strong back in that time. And many of them just became soiled doves because their husbands had died either in the mines or, some gunfight or something. And they didn't have much else to do if they weren't sewing or, taking care of some of the farm or teaching. Well, this was their only other occupation. So they'd been through the hard times, and they did this out of necessity only. So they had to remain tough.
Yeah, they were stuck in the gender roles that didn't really give them a lot of latitude, but that doesn't mean that they were weak and helpless.
Exactly.
The fact that these are both their last Westerns that they did, and just the fact that they're kind of examining the Western itself and just the legend, which all of these Westerns are. They're not the actual thing. And Unforgiven kind of strips back all of that thing and shows it as probably closest to what it really was. These deaths were not easy. They weren't shooting off Indians like crazy.
Yeah.
They weren't whatever they were doing. And Liberty Valance does it within the construct of what those old Westerns were. It just changes around the dynamics and where the pieces go.
Yeah, it does.
Well, yeah.
I mean, even the small things, like Eastwood carrying the shotgun. I mean, there were two reasons for that.
Mhm.
Back then, the cowboys didn't carry a gun on their hip all the time. These guys are out on the range, on the prairie or whatever. They're carrying a rifle,
Yeah.
because it's long range stuff. They're going to hunt for a little food. They want to catch somebody in long range.
And
drive off wolves.
And that's a lot to carry on your hip, a 3.5 pound gun on your hip. It
And they're
gets in your way
cowboys.
when you're trying to
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
They're not gunfighters. They're
They're workers. They're
Mhm.
ranchers. Yeah.
And that's one of the things I find that both films do so well that I think is an essential component of revisionism, which is that take on violence.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you go back to the earliest Westerns, in most of them, they treated violence as very bloodless. So you would have, like in the old serials, I mean, when the good guys shot people, they never killed them. They shot guns out of their hands, or they winged them, or they shot their hats off. The idea that you would have death and its consequences was something that was glossed over,
Mm-hmm.
or they were like faceless, hired guns or something like that. So killing them was like,
you never get to know these guys.
Exactly.
They're just
So-
there to get shot.
so they're inconsequential.
Yeah.
Whereas here you really are confronting the meaning of that violence and the impact of that violence. And it is something that is very impactful. The fact that it's not impactful for somebody like, say, Liberty Valance is one of the things that underscores his evil. So he'll go and kill farmers, as he does in the movie, without a second thought.
Yeah.
In fact, that's one of the things I thought was really interesting, is how there are times in the movie where his own men restrain him.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he's beating Stoddard during the stagecoach robbery, he doesn't stop beating him because he's satisfied. His men pull him
away. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gets the sense that for that kind of person, how they really are exceptional
Mm-hmm.
in terms of that they're abnormal. They're not. It's not what you. And then Money says that way too. You get the impression that he recognizes that he is a very abnormal figure, and he's trying to, in a sense, him being a man of peace is something he has to work at.
Yeah.
And his default mode is, I'm going to kill everything that I kill anything that walks or crawls if I decide I need to. So
Cool. Okay. As long as we don't have any more comments, we'll go move on to our star ratings. Okay, so we'll start with you, Mark. What was your rating for Man Who Shot Liberty Valance?
5 stars for me. This is one of my all-time favorite Westerns. It's one that every time I revisit it, I not only derive enjoyment from it, I find new things to enjoy about it. And that for me is, the hallmark of what a 5-star film should be.
Yeah. Okay, Phil, what do you rate it?
5 stars as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a top-notch Western. It's classic with classic actors. I mean, so many great actors in it. And it's interesting that it's a little more over the top maybe than Unforgiven, but is so memorable too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I can still see every scene after just watching it once, every scene vividly in that film.
Yeah, for me, I'd have to go 5 stars. And the scene that I remember most is the scene with the steaks. So 5 steaks
You
piled
like
high.
those steaks.
I like those steaks.
So where you headed for dinner tonight?
Yeah. Probably not getting steaks, but
This podcast is brought to you by the Steakhouse.
yeah. So this is a kind of a foundational film for me. I saw it in my first year of college, and it was a history of film class. It's the first in the film program, which I had to go to another school after this because it was the only film class they had. But yeah, it was really good. That, along with Strangers on a Train, which we're going to be covering with Phil's wife in a month or two. But yeah, I don't know what else I can say about it. You guys haven't said or hasn't been said, but just that idea of the past and how we view it, and that hazy smoke going over. That's kind of how we view the past.
Yeah.
And is what he said really the truth, or is, I don't know. It's interesting, but yeah, 5 stars for me. Okay, so now let's go to Unforgiven. What's yours, Mark?
This is another 5-star film for me. This is one I haven't returned to as often as The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, and this is one of the reasons why I enjoy doing this podcast, is because I went and I revisited it, and it just was another one where my appreciation was deepened, and I was picking up on all sorts of things that I had missed the first few times I'd seen it, and it's one that I'm looking forward to revisiting at some point in the future. It's just such a great film. I mean, I really like Eastwood's Westerns, and in a way, I'm glad this was his last one, because I hate to think he went out on anything other than this high.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oscar for Best Director, Hackman getting an Oscar. It's such a first-rate film.
Okay, how about you, Phil?
Okay, I agree too. 5 stars on this. And one of the main reasons is because Eastwood is so un-Eastwood from everything we had seen him do up to this point.
Mhm.
The spaghetti westerns and everything. I mean, he showed such a gentle side to him, and he did that so well as an actor. And all the actors in it again too. I mean, Gene Hackman. For me, though, I have to say it wasn't quite as memorable as Liberty Valance. I don't see it visually in my mind as much as I did Liberty Valance, which was in black and white. You'd think the color one would stand out a little bit more, but it doesn't in my brain.
Yeah.
But 5-star movie for sure. Great Western.
It is funny how when I think about Unforgiven, I reflect upon the scenes that I enjoyed the most. With the exception of that final shootout, they tend to be the ones with Hackman and not Eastwood.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Because he's such a big character.
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
And Money is so restrained in the movie, because he's either sick or he's quiet. It's the kid who's more vocal,
more flamboyant. Yeah.
And it's not till the very end that we actually see Eastwood being the Eastwood we remember so vividly from all of those other Westerns he's done.
Okay, so my rating of Unforgiven, I'm going to give it 4.5. And you guys gonna string me up. I was gonna give it 4. I kind of oversold it in my mind the first time I watched it, but then the second time I watched it, I appreciated it for what it was, and it's 5 stars I reserve for favorite of the favorite. It's good. Like, it's top notch, but I'm apologizing for 4.5.
Well, what you can't see because this is a podcast is that Phil and I are both glaring at
me. They're going to string me up. And
nobody's pulled out a whip or a gun yet. But, get with the program here.
But the great things that I love about it, though, is this is going to sound weird, but I get kind of a Lion King vibe of just that legendary feel about it. There's something about the transition from my favorite portion of the movie is the end of Act 2 and the transition into Act 3 of just him talking to the women, and then him reacting to, or the kid reacting to the second killing that they do, and just the reality of that. And that's probably the biggest takeaway from this movie, of just the reality of what killing probably actually was back then, and it is now. But it takes away the gloss of the Western, the romanticism of it. And it's like, nope, this is just death. Like, these things had consequences, and that's probably the biggest takeaway I have from this movie. I do have an interesting question, though, for you guys. The title, both me and my mom were wondering this. Unforgiven, what do you think that means?
I think it's that Eastwood never forgave himself for what he did in his own
character,
mind.
yeah.
His character never forgave himself for his past life.
I like that. Yeah.
I'm inclined to agree with that too, but I also find that it's a title that is so versatile in this movie, in the sense that you start with the women who are unable to forgive what was done to Delilah, and then about how, little Bill is a man who has no forgiveness in him. He has no sense of mercy, and how that ultimately, brings about his demise. It really is, thinking about how if he just had an ability to forgive Ned, really is this character who, did no wrong by Bill's estimation. If he could have forgiven that, then, he would have survived the movie instead of, dying on the floor of a saloon the way that he did.
Yeah. Cool. This was a really fun episode. Phil, do you have anything that you'd like to plug before we?
Yeah, just to let you know, my wife, Tommy, who's going to be on a future podcast about the trains, has just released her new book, Washing Worms, Memories of a Southern Girl. It's available everywhere, Amazon, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, et cetera, but it's a wonderful story about a young girl growing up on a rural farm in Arkansas, basically on an island that was formed by the Horseshoe Lake around near the Arkansas River. But it's just very warm in the way that she describes the scenes and how it shaped her life for the future.
Cool. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah,
I'll
it
have
does.
to check it out.
Yeah.
So our next episode will be Rise of the Planet of the Apes, 2011, and Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, 1972. And our guest will be Hugh Escarpetta, who's actually the star of Time Haunt, which is coming out in just a week or so. So check that out. April 12th. If you'd like to access bonus features and deleted clips from this episode and others, and our sister show, Facets of Story, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Transcend Entertainment. That's TRANSCEND Entertainment. And that's it for today's Crisscross Cinema Podcast.
But you wouldn't clap yet, because making something disappear isn't enough. You have to bring